Hello to the Outfest audience. I hope you just enjoyed No Hard Feelings. Thank you so much for joining us for this post-screening Q&A. My name is Daniel Crook. I'm the programming coordinator at Outfest. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am thrilled to have Faraz Shariat here with us, the director of No Hard Feelings. How's it going?
Hi, it's great. It's 8 p.m. here in Berlin. Doing well. Wishing to be there.
I was going to say, I'm glad that we're going to connect. I'm glad that we're getting to connect digitally. I wish we could do this in person, but it is I gotta say, it's very cool. I'm out here on the West Coast. My morning is just getting started and we're chatting and you're wrapping up your day. So that's the magic of these digital Q&As, right? Perfect. So I would love to kick things off with just sort of a general introduction. If you could introduce yourself to our audience, let them know, obviously you're the director of the film, but maybe some of the collaborators that you worked with, and then we'll dig into some more probing questions.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Faraz. I'm currently living in Berlin, but I was born and raised in Cologne, which is in the west of Germany. And No Hard Feelings is my debut feature film, which I developed and produced together with my collective Jünglinge, namely Paulina Lorenz, who co-wrote and produced the film, and Raquel, who did the casting and the production as well. And yeah, we are super thrilled to be able to share this film with you guys now.
I have to say, this is a film that has really stuck with me since I first watched it. And I have been looking forward to this Q&A because I've been looking forward to chatting with you, but also to have an excuse to watch the movie again. So many images and moments in this movie are just so indelible and stuck in my head, and I'm excited to talk about it with you. One thing I think we could, this could be a jumping off point. I was surprised to find out that the film was autobiographical. And elements of the film are autobiographical. I would love to hear from your perspective, what was it like to put your own story on the screen? And when you're telling your own story, how does that impact, writing the script and directing the film?
I think it's one reason why we decided to work with autobiographical material is that I have a DIY background, so I didn't go to film school. I never really learned how to make films, but worked on music videos and some short formats before. And when I initially started to work on a feature film project, it was kind of like a way to gain security and trust and energy to prepare yourself for this 4 or 5 year journey. But also I think it's another aspect to it is that I'm not a filmmaker who works on films because I love filmmaking. It's more that I have certain political and emotional ideas that I want to represent or share. And we chose film as a format for this project. But yeah, I think it's just the autobiographical moment is the premises of the film. A second generation queer, out and proud, shiny millennial guy who is sentenced to serve community hours, and that happened to me as well. And when I experienced that, I somehow very spontaneously decided that this should be the premise for my debut feature as well. And I think from there, it's of course about creating a distance between the content and the script, but it's also about finding the right people who you are willing to trust with your own story. And that was I think the hardest part of it all, to find the actors and the other collaborators to work with.
Yeah, so when you were casting your lead actor, when you were casting the role of Parvis, was it touchy for you knowing that this character was going to represent your own story? Did you have a fidelity to making sure it stayed true to you, or were you willing to let the character and this actor take on a life of its own?
100% the second option, I think. It's not just my story, it's also the actor's story. In a way, it's also the story of all other queer POC guys living in Germany or in white-dominated countries. And I think that it was like very inspiring for me to talk to other queer actors of color and hear of their experiences. And obviously the Irani aspect is quite dominant in the story, but I think the way we treated it is more like obviously trying to be specific about it, but also I think it was more about what it means to be non-white in Germany and grow up. So yeah, I think it's a very universal experience for many BPOC people. And I also think that, I don't know, I think it's just really, really cool to know or to get the feedback that people reading the script and meeting us for possible lead role, we're not talking about their abilities or so much, but more about what that meant to them reading the script. And that was a good sign, I think.
Absolutely. But at the very beginning of the film, you get the feeling this is going to be, you know, a wonderfully shot, wonderfully acted, but queer coming of age story. And very quickly it becomes a narrative about immigration and about assimilation, and about various barriers to entry for people of color in a white dominated country like Germany, right? So I'm curious, when you are trying to develop this narrative, how is it, and you say that you were very politically motivated when creating this film, how is it that you are able to weave those politics into the narrative of the film? How are you able to balance like the fact that it is a wonderful character study, but on the same point, you're making some very smart and strong points about the status of immigration in Europe?
I think one very helpful tool was to do a proper like research, because like when talking or reading about the film as an autobiographical film, one would probably think that everything just comes from my own story, but that wasn't really the case. We did a lot of interviews with people and asked them about their experiences, and obviously people in our society don't just make an experience as a queer person, but also as a man or a woman or a non-binary person. And I think that like having all those different experiences coming from different axes of your identity was very helpful in creating this different plot layers. And I think it's like, yeah, it's just one of the major drives for us to not think of our characters as like one theme or one subject, but as a multitude of experiences.
So I think the film feels thoroughly modern across the board, both in the highs and lows of the narrative. And what you just said there reminds me of one of my favorite elements of the film, which is just how cross-cultural the film is, both in a multitude of identities that one character might inhabit, down to the fact that on this soundtrack, you've got Grimes, who is obviously not coming from Germany. You've got characters eating sushi, which is obviously not a native cuisine to Germany. So I'm curious, when you were putting together sort of these cross-cultural elements, what was your driving intention behind that?
I think one, that a country like Germany is shaped by migration for generations now. It's not happening since 10 or 15 years, it's happening since 70 or 80 years. And I think making that visible by creating a hybrid aesthetic, and by that I mean like like experiencing sensual elements from different cultural backgrounds, is very common for everyone growing up in countries like Germany, defined by migration. And yeah, and I think the other thing is that this film is coming from a digital native that is growing up with the internet, and obviously that gives you a lot of tools and possibilities, and to have a discourse or dialogue with other perspectives and cultures. And that is, I think, something that is very vital to the experience of our protagonist.
I completely agree. And I love the way you called it a hybrid aesthetic. I think in a way, it's one of the strongest points you make about the beauty of multiculturalism, that these are things to celebrate the fact that we can have a queer character of Iranian descent in Germany who's obsessed with Sailor Moon and eating sushi, right? And that's a beautiful thing. Whereas these characters encounter so much casual and institutional racism throughout the film, whether that be motivated by a white supremacy. or some other nationalist means. I think that the way that you evoke that hybrid aesthetic is in and of itself a really strong point that you're making about the beauty of this experience, not the barriers to it. One thing though, I had to say that because I love the way you said that. And you also, you use the word sensual, which is a word that keeps coming back to me when I watch the film too, because, and I don't just mean sexy, although the film's very sexy as well. But the movie seems dominated and guided by sense, by touch, by taste, by texture. So I was surprised to hear you say that you didn't have much of a film background, because that to me is the essence of cinema, being able to show people picking up peaches out of water and feeling that sensation as an audience member. So when you were trying to build that sensual aesthetic, tell me more about the process behind that.
I think I'm like a proper Vimeo generation kid. Like I'm super highly inspired by music videos, short films, these very like abstract hybrid films circulating in the internet since probably 15 years now. And I think that the process of creating a language for the film was very much shaped, like, could be defined as like a mind map or something. There were images, there were sounds, tracks, poses, gestures, fashion, image, whatever. Like there's just a lot of things coming together, and for everything that stood with us, we tried to find a translation to build that into the film. And I think that just liberates you in like a narratively, because you end up maybe making weird decisions for where the story goes, but they feel very intuitive. And I think that also a big portion of being naive was also very helpful, because you just have like a feeling or an idea, and you know that this film won't cost like 5 million euros. So you somehow feel also a bit more free to just try something out and then see in the edit if it works or not. Like the film was restructured quite a lot in the edit as well, and elements in a scene, and not just try to cover the major psychological essence of the scene, but also maybe a sensual.
Absolutely. And I love what you say there about being part of a Vimeo generation. The film becomes multimedia in that way when you approach it from that perspective. I'm thinking about towards the end of the film, those couple of sequences that completely drop out of narrative altogether. And you've got that wonderful, is it trap or techno that's going on in the background? And we're seeing just a collection of faces at the refugee center. And it almost feels like a dream. It's absolutely dazzling. Not to just spend the entire Q&A complimenting you, but I do love the film. So one thing that I want to talk to you about, I had a hunch when I was watching it for the first time that you had cast your own parents in the film. And then turns out I was correct about that. So tell me about, first of all, the decision to cast your parents as Parvis's parents. And then also, what's it like to direct your parents?
It's fun. Otherwise I wouldn't do it. But I have a really long relationship, like collaboration going on with my parents. So when I applied for university, I studied cultural studies, but in a more practical way. I applied with a short film that I directed together with my parents, and we were all together in front of the camera also. And from then on, I continued to work with them. We shot a music video together for Flight Facilities, I think in 2016 or 17. And after that, I also shot a short film documenting their every day after I've moved out. And I think from then on, when working on No Hard Feelings, it was quite clear to me that their voice needs to be in that film as well, and not just represented as something like something from other people. But I think it was really important to share the experience of crafting the film also with them. They were there for 8 weeks during the shoot, in the prep time, and in the end, they were some sort of parents to the whole crew. And I think that emotional energy also is very visible in some other scenes where they are not even in front of the camera, but we're helping behind of the camera. And I think this intimacy and warmth that is coming from so many characters in the film is also shaped by their presence too.
I think that that's quite beautiful that there's a multi-generational aspect going on behind the camera and in front of the camera. And it also lends such a high degree of authenticity. I think about that incredible moment near the end of the film, in the back of the shop when the mother character is telling Parvis that they've never actually felt at home in Germany, and that it breaks her heart to hear that 30 years later he feels the same way. Is that something that you'd ever heard? Is that a sentiment you had heard your parents express, or is that something that maybe you found out in your research that you mentioned at the beginning of the Q&A? I mean, obviously, I just mean sort of that anecdotal expression of it. Did you hear that?
Both. I think I did both in the way that I heard it from other people, and I also heard it from mine. And like all the dialogues that my parents say in the film were written together with them. We had like check-ins and discussed, and it was actually quite interesting how the film opened up a space where we can discuss our own family history in a liberated way, because you always had like the film as a backup. Yeah, I think it's also interesting to show. I mean, I think it's obvious, but it's super important for the film to show or to offer another idea of Irani parents in a Western country, because there are so many stigmas and prejudices going around about how I don't know, Iranian or Middle Eastern families react to homosexuality, and I think it's very important to oppose that with other ideas and representations.
Yeah, that makes me think about the scene in the film, the first night that Parvis and Amon have been together, and his father opens the door and Amon leaves. And his dad's reaction is not, "What are you doing?" but "Did I do something?" And I found that to be such a refreshing presentation of those characters on the screen. I've never seen a presentation of Iranian characters of that age in cinema before when it comes to attitudes about being queer. But speaking of Amon, I would love to chat about this sort of triangle that's at the center of the film, right? Between Banafshe, Amon, and then Parvis. Now, that to me seemed a very intriguing way to explore this film, that triangle of interests, those three characters. Now, I know the film was autobiographical. In your experience, were there two other characters in the situation, or is that a narrative decision that you made?
It's a narrative decision we made. I mean, to be honest, the premises of the film is very autobiographical, but from then on, we used all the tools fiction storytelling is serving us, and I think, but still, I think it's super important to. I mean, I believe that it's super important to create films, especially gay films, that are inclusive and treat their female characters in a more with solidarity and complexity. And that is one of the main reasons why we decided that the female voice in our film needs to be strong as the gay love story, and that just leads to some certain narrative decisions for the script as well. And also, like, to make this a film about a love story is a bit too easy, I think, for the complexity of elements that come together in that encounter. And I think not just friendship, but also sisterhood, and trying to take care or leaving, like opening up a space where someone can take accountability for oneself as well. These elements are so present in the relationships the characters are having. And it's not so easy to tell that by two guys sucking each other's dick only.
No, I have to say she almost walks away with the film in every scene she's in. And I think she provides such a crucial perspective on the film as a coming of age story, and that Parvis realizes that parts of this story do not belong to him. For instance, she is the character who's being threatened with deportation, which is, for all of his own very serious issues around his identity and being queer in Berlin, it's her perspective that really forces him to realize that the story is not just about him here. And I really appreciated that perspective. Let's see, we're just about out of time here. So I think I'll ask you a question that is maybe a fun question, maybe a little nerdy, but I have to ask what it was like at the Berlin Film Festival this year when you won the Teddy Award. So the film, for those of you who did not know this already, didn't read the description for the film, No Hard Feelings won the Teddy Award this year at the Berlin Film Festival. The Teddy Award is the world's premier LGBTQ film honor, I would say. And Faraz has now joined the ranks of Pedro Almodovar and Cheryl Dunye by winning that prize. So I'm curious, what was it like when you heard your name called? What was Berlin like in general?
When you say that, that sounds so big. I should appreciate that much more. I mean, I love the whole Teddy community and the team and the panorama, the section where our film premiered is just, yeah, have a haven for queer voices, I think. But I was feeling super sick that day, and I called the festival guy and was like, okay, sorry, but should I come? I'm feeling very bad. I want to stay home. And he was like, no, you gotta come. It was worth it, and it was a very obviously honoring moment because I followed the Teddy, and it's such a good also gateway to other options, and it's a very international prize too, which is cool. And I think it's also like, yeah, it's super serious for us because it gives you recognition and also validation for something you've done. But then again, it's also like, yeah, being part of a community is something that is very, I think, present in the film. Like the urge to be part of a community is very present in that film too. And I think getting like invited to that community is also something that, yeah, obviously means a lot to us as a film crew that worked on this film.
Well, I'm so thrilled you could join us for this, and congratulations on the film. Again, the film's No Hard Feelings. If you're watching the Q&A first, definitely go watch the movie now, or if you've just watched the movie, maybe watch it again. It is that good. But Faraz, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your film with us. And I look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye.